Moments ago, I spoke with Keith Turi, FEMA's Acting Director of Response and Recovery, and I began by asking him about the biggest logistical challenges the agency is facing right now, delivering aid to the impacted communities.
Yeah, I think one of the most critical things we're doing right now is making sure that we can get to those communities that need help and support them with our state and local partners. We pre-possessioned assets throughout the region, impacted all the way from Florida up to North Carolina before the storm, and now all of those commodities and assets are moving into the areas. In certain areas like Western North Carolina, obviously there are significant issues with transportation, roads that are out. And so part of the effort is working with the state and the local officials to identify what those areas are for transportation and using air and other means if we need to. And so some positive trends are happening. There were over 400 roads closed in North Carolina just a few days ago, and now we're down to 180. So still progress being made, but still a long way to go. One thing I do want to just stress for folks is that we do have a major disaster declaration declared in Florida, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And so if you need assistance from FEMA, you can register at 1-800-621-3362.
And obviously there are enormous logistical challenges. You mentioned the fact that so many of these roads have been shut down. There's also communications problems, cell towers. Many of these victims don't even have power. So what do you say to some of these victims who still haven't received any aid? And do you have any idea what the estimate is of people who still need that support right now?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say there is a massive effort of local, state, and federal officials across a number of agencies that are working around the clock to help make sure that everyone that needs assistance gets it, particularly in some of those areas that are without communication, without power. We are working with the providers, whether that be cell providers or power providers, to make sure that we can reduce any logistical barriers they have to potential access. We're actually bringing satellite communications, Starlink communications into a number of areas to make sure that they can get access to local officials. And so, yeah, it's a challenge. We're working through it, and know that the help is on the way for sure.
And do you have an anticipation of how long it'll take to reach every community that's been devastated by the storm at this point?
We don't have an estimate in every community. It's going to take some time, day by day. We're working through in a very coordinated way what that looks like, and that also being helped by the local officials that have an understanding of where those people are and how we can make sure that they get access to them.
And you said that FEMA at one point had 4 search and rescue teams in North Carolina before Helene hit. Should FEMA have had more teams in place, teams in places like Asheville before Friday?
We had over 14 teams staged up and down the East Coast. We had 4 teams that were staged in North Carolina, and that's just the federal teams. That's on top of what the state and local governments already have. And then we had a pipeline already determined to bring more teams in. And so we had rescues that were ongoing. There have been over 800 rescues that have been occurred across in North Carolina and over 1,400 across the entire impacted area. Those search and rescue teams are still out doing access checks, making sure that they can find folks that may need assistance. And so the pipeline of resources is still moving to support those that need it.
Obviously, there's always so much focus on coastal communities as a hurricane is bearing down on the United States, which makes sense. But we obviously are seeing a tremendous amount of devastation in some of these inland communities, particularly in the mountains. Do you think that there's going to be more of a focus on preparing these inland communities when a hurricane comes? Is that a new challenge of hurricane preparedness?
Actually, the rain associated with the tropical system has been a long-standing challenge. I think we are seeing more significant rain events, both in hurricanes and outside of hurricanes. But there have been a number of storms over the years that have created significant inland flooding risks, and our partners at the Weather Service helped forecast that in advance. And that's why we were able to pre-position resources in all of these inland states that may have needed some assistance. Even though the storm was coming up through the Big Bend, we knew that Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina were going to be impacted, and that helped in the preparedness efforts.
And if you can give us an idea of what your resource allocation efforts are like right now. There are already members of Congress suggesting that perhaps Congress will have to return to session before the election to provide more funding for FEMA and these agencies that are helping with the recovery. Is there any way to tell whether or not you're going to have the resources necessary to help the need that's kind of grown out of this storm?
Yeah, we have the resources that we need today to make sure that we're handling this response and for the weeks ahead. Big disasters like this, they always typically will create a range of requirements across a number of federal agencies. And I know that's something that we'll be working with others on moving forward. But for today, we have what we need to handle this response and to make sure that we're helping everyone who needs it.
All right, you guys have a tremendous amount of work ahead of you. Keith Turi, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.